Fish. I'm the founder of Group. We are a women collective patrons of crafts. And for the past month, I have been taking you around England, London Craft Week, London Design Week. Last week, we were in Stoke-on-Trent at the British Ceramic Biennial. And today we are in Lancashire, and we are at the Whitaker Museum for the British Textile Biennial. The Biennale is really a series of exhibitions that are dotted around various locations. And I've chosen the Whitaker Museum, first because it's a spectacular building, as you're going to see, but also because the 62 Group of Textile Artists is showing here. And as you know, I follow their work, and it's always so interesting, engaging, and make us think. So I couldn't resist but to bring you here today. Part of the group is Richard McVittis, that you have met before, and we are extremely privileged to have 4 other of the artists who are presenting work to this exhibit today. We have Hannah Lamb, Sally Spinks, Isabel Curry, and Emily Jo Gibbs, and we're going to be meeting with them for the next hour.
I was just going to introduce a little bit about the 62 group and explain a little bit about who we are. So the 62 Group of Textile Artists is an exhibiting group. We've been running since 1962, and we're one of the longest running textile art groups in the world, as far as I know. And we're established to really promote the work of textile artists on a national and international stage. And although it's based in the UK, we now have membership all over the world. The membership numbers about 65 members. And as I said, they're global, a global kind of mix, which is really a nice connection for this exhibition, which links to kind of the global context of textiles. So I'll pass on to Richard.
Great, yeah, really happy to be here. So thank you all for signing up. So the theme of this year's exhibition focuses on that global context of textiles. Textiles is part of the way we live our world. We wear clothes every day, so it's so important to how we think about it. And so 2 years ago, we were approached by Jenny Rutter at the British Textile Biennial to come up with a show based on a brief that she set. So we have 22 artists featured in this show. And it's a range of diverse pieces of work which explores the historical context of textiles. A lot of work is based around the themes of Lancashire and Rosendale, and actually this museum, but also the heritage of textile production within our own lives and the context of that. And actually each of us has got our own personal story that we've brought to the works here at the gallery. So a very diverse range of different artworks, different medias, different processes, and some of them quite emotive as well, and quite interesting to see how textile stretches so back. You know, it's each of us has touched our lives, and that sort of causality of all that sort of textile heritage is what we'll be exploring today.
So I'm really delighted to hear that you have linked this exhibit and your work to your personal stories, because textile, I think, is one of these materials, medium that links to one's personal story more than any other medium. Before we start and we go to Isabel Curry, who is going to be our first hostess, we're going to be discovering her work. Maybe you can tell us, Richard, a little bit about the work that is behind you there.
So yes, so this is Esther Bornemisa, and this is called The Loop, and it was inspired by Esther's research into the archives of former local textile mills, the Goldberger factory, and so it stayed in the family hand from 1784. And it started as this small blue printing workshop, and it grew into one of the biggest factories in Budapest. So during the research, you know, the ideas joined up together about creating this personal sample collection on loop cards. So these are all sort of vintage loop cards, recycled materials with minimal waste, and she saves even the smallest bits when working on them. Yeah, this reminded her of that closed loop system where waste is recycled back into production as much as possible. And so it's made from jacquard cards, it's cotton, it's silk, flax fabrics, raw cotton, weft yarn, dyed, monoprint. I mean, it's full process here, and it's quite a large sort of imposing piece in the gallery.
Now we have here several cards or inclusions. Do you know a little bit about this? We don't have the artist here, but maybe you know a little bit about it.
Yeah, so this is Maggie Henton, and this is called Bloodlines, Ghosts of an Empire. And this investigates the historic connections between the cotton textile industry of Lancashire and the Indian subcontinent during the 18th and 19th centuries. And it was that complex sort of relationship, the exploitation of the workers, including women and children in both regions. And so it's reminders of trade that's still visible in many of the old buildings. I mean, the legacy of the textile industry is still so prevalent in this whole area and across Yorkshire as well. So on the front, you have images of old mills, sort of shadows of people, and then you have this sort of stitched line running through these 8 acrylic blocks. And on the front, you've got these sort of patterns and words from the mills, both here in India and across Lancashire.
It's amazing work. I mean, the transposition and showing the geography, the patterns, the words. I hope that it comes out really nicely on the screen because it's quite remarkable. And then we have a community project here, which I think is so joyous and fabulous.
So yeah, this is a work called the Global Quilt, and you can see that in, and these are called soffit puffs. So they're made from circles of fabric, and they're stitched along the edges, and then they're pulled to create these yo-yos or soffit puffs. And this is a project that Lynn ran with the Whitaker. So all the pieces of work here come from fabric donated by people that either work here or live in the area. And lots of fabrics from all around the world, and then people, contributed to the making of it. So she ran a series of workshops, and then she compiled and put the piece together to present this global quilt, which shows again this sort of the international aspect of textiles, but also as a commentary on, immigration, racism, and all that sort of stuff to do with textiles. But it's a really sort of striking piece, but very multi-layered.
Richard, is the work here for sale? The work that you have put together?
All the work is for sale. I think there might be some work that's not for sale, but there is a price list. There is some work for sale. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. We will see you upstairs when we look at your work, and I'm now going to turn the camera towards Isabel Curry, who has created 3D textile from just threads, and I think it's absolutely mind-blowing. So before we start, Isabel, maybe tell us a little bit about you. Where is your studio? What is your inspiration? And how did you approach this project?
And my work is basically embroidery, and I use embroidery threads to create three-dimensional shapes. I'm interested in the way that stitches are actually three-dimensional. They travel through fabrics. They don't just sit on the surface of the fabric. So that's what my work is all about generally. And for this particular work, I was interested to actually, I've zoomed right out with the whole topic and decided to create a globe actually of threads, which represents the connections of all the different textile processes traveling around the world. So fibers might be grown in one country and then sent to another for processing, sent to another to be made into fabrics, into clothing, and then yet onto another one to be sold, so that the things really do travel round and round the world in the process of their lives, and ultimately get sent to another country to be recycled. So that was really what I was interested in depicting, just the sort of point-to-point lines of communication between different countries.
Is there a frame that creates the shape and then you link the threads, or do they seem to be going through cards maybe?
I'm not quite sure. You're asking me how the process works of making it. I start off with the Perspex box, and then I put the pieces of fabric. This is organza fabric. I put that into the box, stitch it into the box, and then I do the stitching into the fabric. So it's quite difficult to get into parts of it. It's I use tweezers and things like that to get to the difficult to reach areas.
How long did it take you?
It took to make about 3 months, but there was quite a lot of planning involved before I started actually doing the stitching.
And did you start with a drawing?
I did some sketches, but I do tend to start making diagrams quite quickly rather than drawings as such. That's, yeah, basically I do more diagrams than actual sketches. And is it the first time you do a 3D? Oh no, all my work is 3D. All my work is 3D. That's my overall interest, is in embroidery stitches and how they are a three-dimensional thing. The nature of a stitch is that it's three-dimensional.
That's amazing. You see, you did it. You were so nervous and you did so well.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So we have now done the first room. I'm going to go to the second floor and show you the rest of the work, and we're going to be meeting them, the other artists. So let me turn the camera so you can see in what a beautiful room and place we are. Look at this. This is absolutely amazing. And for the club members, Sally is here. We have a member from England who's here, and another guest who's here. Look at these gardens here. Isn't it incredible? This is the Whitaker Museum, and the sun is coming out for us. It's been bucketing down with rain, but now it's lifting us up. So I'm going to take you upstairs to the second floor where the rest of the exhibit is. And the Whitaker Museum has all sorts of other exhibits and items. You can see a little bit here. I'll give you a quick snoop around because it's really a shame not to do that. Let me turn the camera around again. Look, you see this is an old house with beautiful high ceilings. And I'll just take you to this room here, which is the museum per se, before we go to see the rest of the Biennial textile exhibit. You see these, this is all about the looms and the weaving. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box. Of course, we'll take your questions as we go along. Okay, so now let's go and join again the rest of our friends at the 62 group. I wanted to say before, we're going to start with Emily, but before we do that, I want to show you this piece of work by Jennifer Smith Windsor, who is Canadian and is part of the 62 group. As Richard mentioned earlier, it is an international group, and it's all about showing where our garments come from through the labels that she had in her own wardrobe. I spoke to Jennifer yesterday, and she will be our guest for an In Conversation in November. So this little jacket is full of labels, and you can read about her artist statement on the website. So now we're going to turn our gaze to Emily Jo Gibbs, who is well known of the Rue Pigalle collective and platform. Emily did a workshop for us, and I feature her work on a regular basis. So Emily, we're going to start. I think we know what you do. So I would love to hear all about the project that you did for this exhibit.
Okay, hi everybody. You will know that I make my work predominantly from silk organza. And when I was thinking about the theme of the exhibition, about the global nature of textiles, it got me thinking about where my textiles come from and my silk organzas. And I know that the ones that I enjoy working with are Chinese and Indian ones. And I like those ones because they're slightly coarser than the European ones. The European ones tend to be finer, more fibers per centimetre. And they're sort of deemed as better quality, but are actually more floaty and not as good for the way that I work. So I simply got in touch with some of my suppliers and said, you know, I'd like to find out more about the people that weave the silk that I buy from you. And I get it from different suppliers. And one supplier called Ponji's got back in touch to say, oh yes, we've got some photographs of the women who are working in the factory. And he sent those through. And it was just a couple of pictures, which was like, oh, this is fascinating. And so that was sort of starting point. And then I got back in touch with him to say, can we have some more photos? Is there, where are your factories and who are these people and what are their names? And I got an email back that said, with some more photographs, but saying, but very cagey about anything else. So that was, these are all like really interesting things, I guess. And so it's very common, I think, in the West to say, I'd like to credit the person that's taken these photographs and who are they, and just trying to glean any more information. And the factory came back with a hilarious response, which was just some guys in the factory took the pictures. If your client would like to thank us, then just buy more silk. It was like, great. So I know very little about this lady who's she's contemporary. It's now, and she's I just thought it was just really interesting the way she was dressed. And so I made a drawing that the work is based on, but it's from a photograph, and the fibres that are going to be woven into the silk are on a big sort of reel, and she's just checking through those fibres and looking at them. And in some of the other photos, I thought it was lovely because when the fabric was woven, you could really see the artist that making the silk, or the mill worker, whatever I don't even know their job titles. She was pressing on the fabric, and I could see that she was reading the material through her hand. I thought that was so interesting because as makers, we're all about touch. So I felt like a connection to this lady who I know absolutely nothing about. I don't know her name or even what part of China they're from, but I feel it's in some way connected, even though I know very little. So that's what it's all about.
I think that the intensity of her gaze is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, she's just really looking at what she's doing, which I think, as people who know my work will know, it's all about shining a light on makers and celebrating them. And I think Eva, is quite interesting how you can look at a picture from the other side of the world of somebody who's making this cloth that I use all the time. And there she is, really knowledgeable about her job. But obviously it's a very skilled job, and it's nice that you can get that from looking at that, and it sort of becomes a big circle, I guess. Yeah. And
it's really, without her, your art wouldn't exist.
I know, isn't it extraordinary? It's just wonderful. And I feel like this is the beginning of a project. So this is one Chinese worker. There's obviously more workers. I'm really interested also in the textile makers who weave this cloth in India. That's also really interesting. So I feel it has a bit of legs, this whole project. So it's quite exciting. Yeah.
No, I think there's so much that you can do and explore, and message you can carry, stories that you can weave. Excuse the pun.
Yes.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, always a pleasure.
Pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
So before I move to actually the next room, I just want to give you a quick look at what we have here. This looks like a puppet, and I don't know much about these pieces, so I invite you to go and view them on the website and read the stories on the website. This one is called Hang On a Minute, I think. Oh no, sorry, it's Daisy Collingridge, and it's Jenny is Not a Puppet. and it's quite striking, and I'm sure that there's a fantastic story behind that piece. And this is the piece that's called Hang On a Minute, and it's by Ye Marys. And it looks like a family and lots of colors, and they all have an attitude, and you can see that they are connecting with each other, communicating. It looks like there's a lot of different traditions there and different styles. And I think it's a fabulous installation. Oh, Emily seems to know something about this one.
I just know that it's they're on a rubbish dump, this family of people, and their feet are black because that is in reference to their carbon footprint. So I don't know a lot about the work, but I thought that was a wonderful element of it.
So yeah, the piece is called Hang On a Minute, and it's a large work, and it's by J. Marys, which is, she wanted to express her concern about fast fashion and the fashion industry, and that sort of careless regard to how our clothes are made and how we throw them away, and how that sort of has to change. And so she's written here, there's little regard of cost of materials, the exploitation of natural resources like water, the conditions and wages of labour force used in making these garments, both in the UK and abroad. So what we have here are 5 figures, and they represent the main customers, the 2 teenagers, the mum in her new dress with her little girl in a fancy dress, so readily available, the young boy in his sports gear, and they all have large bare feet with blackened feet, suggesting their heavy carbon footprint. Their legs are covered with press headlines. So this work really invites you to sort of go in and have a look at what they're saying. So it's quite a sort of subversive piece. You really got to see what these headlines are saying. So their legs are covered with press headlines about low wages. And the figures appear to be walking across a huge landfill site. This is not a usual rubbish tip. The landscape is a compilation of images from Dhaka, Bangladesh. They contain mountains of clothing and waste fabric, which is discarded from local factories. So it's heavily sort of layered piece of work, but you've got to sort of dig in and sort of use your eyes to sort of look at the sort of hidden message within all of that.
But wasn't that amazing? Thank you so much, Richard, for the knowledge and sharing it. So we're turning around now, and here is another piece here by Sue Stone, and the title is Made in Greensbury, the documenting of a small lifestyle clothing brand called Anywhere. And Anywhere is spelled Anywear. And again, there's lots of messages in there, lots of words and patterns and different clothing styles. Such expression on the characters, and there has to be a fantastic story. Richard, do you want to share it with us?
I'm here with my notes. So this is made by Sue Stone, and it's called Made in Greensbury, and it's that documenting of a small lifestyle brand. And actually the person you see there is Sue, that's the artist. So this actually documents her company. So in 1975 to 2002, in this Edwardian shop premises in Greensbury, northeast Lincolnshire, an area associated with fishing more than clothing, Anywhere designed and manufactured women's wear. In the early days, the cloth used to make one-off designs was woven in Colne, but as the Lancashire cotton industry declined, good quality cotton fabrics became more and more difficult. Cash flow was tight, and in this business, Sunday was not a day of rest, but a day spent travelling. The business turned to fabric merchants in Manchester and Salford to supply their clothing, weekly trips from Greensbury to Lancashire to choose bolts of cloth that now travel from places like India and the Far East. So yeah, it's a story about her business and her life, as it's linen, recycled clothing fabrics, cotton and linen threads, and it's hand and machine stitch, applique, piecing, and drawing.
Fabulous. All right, so now we are going to meet 3 more makers. Why don't we start with Sally? I have to tell you that this installation, I'm going to take a few steps back and show you how incredible this installation is, and it wraps around. I mean, this is very tall. Huh? I don't know if you can get a sense of the scale, but I would venture that it's about 7, 8 feet tall, and it wraps around the wall, and just like hugs it and espouses all the shapes. It's just mesmerizing. We're going to hear in a minute what it is made of, and then it comes around here. It's I just, the red is vibrant. It looks like it's tufted, and it's quite monumental. So here is Sally. Let me put a camera on her. It's nice to meet you, Sally.
Hi, nice to meet you too. Thanks for having us on your podcast.
Absolutely. So Sally, tell us a little bit about your story, where your studio is, and the inspiration for this piece.
Yeah, so my name's Sally Spinks, and I'm a designer and an artist, and I live in Southeast London. And the reason I really wanted to explore flock for this project was because it's one of the first reuse and recycle processes, I think, that happened in the world. So flock was invented by the Chinese 3,000 years ago, and they found a way to use waste materials, so the fluff that was from other textile processes, and they glued it to fabric to make that fabric more valuable. So they were really adding some economic value to by using waste, which is what we're all trying to strive to do now. But not only did it happen in China, then it was taken over by monks in medieval Germany who mechanized the process. And then in the 17th century in the UK, flock became one of those things that allowed the middle classes to aspire to very sumptuous silk wall hangings. So it was a cheaper alternative to some very expensive wall hangings. So it started off being very opulent, and then it was sort of an aspirational thing. And then in the UK in the 1970s, it became famous for being on Indian restaurants, because they wanted to sort of convey grandeur and the decadence of a time gone by. And then it fell out of fashion. And then back around the turn of this century, flock came back again. And now it's on anything from, you know, pug dog statues to car interiors. I've seen it all on all sorts of products. And what I really wanted to do in making this piece was really accentuate that, you know, it's a very sumptuous and, you know, very sort of deep red is one of the traditional colours of it. And I really wanted to highlight that. So I used a technique called tufting. You use a big gun almost to poke wool through a piece of canvas, and then you get a pile on the other side. So it took a lot of time to make each individual piece in this process. But I also wanted to show that it's a connected pattern, but you can also break out the individual pieces as well.
It's sumptuous is certainly the word.
Thank you.
And so did you, it looks like there's almost a fleur-de-lis pattern.
Yeah, it's a very traditional flock pattern, but it is based on a fleur-de-lis, and it just creates that repeat pattern. So if you look in some of the areas there, you can almost see a circle of a repeat pattern there. But I wanted to show that they're equally attractive when you break them out and they can become individual features, or even like down here where you've got a little cheeky hand of the fleur-de-lis just poking around the corner. They can stand on their own, or they can be part of a group as well.
Do you think that it's an installation that would have application, for example, in a hotel environment?
Definitely, yes, definitely. And I think one of the things about it is because it's so thick and so heavy, the sound quality would be really improved in echoey rooms, for example. It doesn't feel so echoey in here. Now we have this up here. But yes, it could be in a hotel environment, it's a piece of art, but it also has a kind of functional being as well.
Thank you so much, Sally. It was
Thank
fantastic.
you.
So
behind you, there's some more red, and I'm wondering if Richard is at the ready with his notes to tell us a little bit about the work of Hazel Bruce. It's called Irish Sampler.
So yes, this is Hazel. So Hazel has lived and worked in Belfast for 30 years, and she teaches textile art and embroidery at Ulster University. So this piece is called Irish Sampler, and it was made towards the end of this intensive year of teaching on campus under COVID. So a lot of sort of online teaching, I'm sure. So she references sort of repetitive sampling and demonstration to small groups under restrictions. And this piece sort of reflects on the Ulster linen industry, specifically whitework embroidery made on industrial machines by thousands of girls and women at the turn of the 19th century. And that was a significant inspiration and one that resonates today when teaching students to use the same fast industrial machines. So these machines haven't really changed that much. So practice and perseverance are essential if real precision is required. But these machines offer huge potential in a way of sort of mark making and drawing. There's lots of scope there for creating many different patterns. So the piece is about endless samples made when showing people how to use the machine, the meandering line, the marks, the patterns that usually go no further, and finding time just to keep going on. We all had more time, didn't we? So this is a sort of a reference, a marking of that time. Traditional red and white Ulster quilts inspired the colour. An Irish sampler was worked on an embroidered linen cloth, reworking a domestic textile, working freely, following no pattern, making marks, searching, persevering, improving. And these are Hazel's words, not mine. So it's an embroidered linen cloth, cotton thread, and then she's used an industrial machine embroidery.
Isn't that spectacular? I think it draws in. I don't know if today I'm being drawn to the red color or to this incredible detail, but it's fabulous. So Richard, now let's talk about your work.
Okay, yeah, so I have made two works for the exhibition. The first work is called Cold Themes, and it's presented here as a map. And so my starting point was really looking at the sort of the Lancashire area, first of all, and what sort of fueled it. And that was thinking about coal, and coal being really the fuel of the cotton industrial revolution. It was really the driving force of the textile mills. Coal was used to power the steam and the steam mills and looms. So yeah, that was sort of starting point of that. And actually here in Lancashire, I found a really interesting economic study from 2010 by Theo Balderson, which is about the economics of coal and the abundance of it. And that's what made Lancashire this dominant industrial force, that it sat on top of this huge coal seam. Also that it was close to water, cheap labour, and also very close to Liverpool for the docks for the cotton to come in. So that was the starting point there. And then also I wanted to, but coal was really an important part of my life, and I wanted to sort of interrogate that further. So it really started me down the journey of trying to figure out where my relationship to coal started. And actually stepping back and looking back at my own history, it really started at the same time as the textile industrial revolution. So my family arrived into Scotland at the beginning of the century, and they took up jobs at the newly formed Lady Bank, the Lady Victoria Colliery in Scotland. And they were on the way to Canada, surprisingly, actually. They were farmers. Something went completely wrong, and so they had to stay in Scotland. And they didn't have language, they could use their hands, and they worked at this coal mine. The coal mine supplied all the coal for the mills on the Scottish borders, So our sort of story and our link to textiles and coal started then. And really this piece is about mapping those sort of hidden landscapes beneath our feet. I was initially drawn to this map here, which is the coal fields of Great Britain, and it was from the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1875. And I was drawn to it purely because of its aesthetics, but also, you know, it looks like a big sort of geological drawing, these sort of big charcoal drawings done on this very planetary cosmic scale. And so wherever coal was, change happened, and communities and towns grew from there. And really the legacy of the textile industry continues now. So my life and my identity is really built in where coal was. So this piece here documents all the coal mines that my dad worked at, my family worked at. So we've got all the coal fields of Scotland, the coal fields just outside of Edinburgh. We have here Lancashire, which is, I wanted to include that because this is where the exhibition is. We have South Staffordshire, but then also we have South Africa. So in 1982, my whole family emigrated to South Africa. And so, you know, we went wherever the coal was. Coal really did shape my life. And we moved to a place called Witbank. It got renamed into an African name, which means place of coal. And then also my work is so black and white. And so there's this sort of weird serendipity about how this is all sort of merged together into the work that's sort of created. So, you know, I come from a part of the world where all the men had to be coal miners, were people of labour, of working with hands, of materials. And there's something quite comforting at the end of this project. And this is some of the documentation that I found. So sadly, my dad passed away when I was very young. So this is a way to sort of reconnect with my dad, to reconnect with my family, sort of process that. But this is a really interesting document here, which was his National Coal Board Apprentice Indentures, which is his certificate. He was 16 years old when he started in the mine in 1957. And he was an apprentice craftsman in mining industry. And I really like that idea that we were both these sort of craftsmen of a material. Obviously, mine is a much softer material, but there's this really nice link that we were both men of materials, we were craftsmen, interested in sort of, well, maybe he didn't have any choice really, whereas I had more of a choice, this idea of labour and process. So it's really sort of a map of those pieces, of that story, and it's a play on the word coal seams. So in a garment, seams are used to shape a garment, and coal has really shaped our society, and it continues to do so now. We think of it as an old material, a material of the past, but actually even just listening to the news this week about new coal mines, about China digging out more coal, it's still quite diverse, you know, it's a very controversial material. And then lastly, you can just see a faint pattern on the piece here, which is actually the first ever pattern of the donkey jacket, which was a traditional miner's jacket. And randomly, the first ever jacket was designed and made in Rugeley, Staffordshire, which is here, and was on the street that I walk past every single day to school. So there was this sort of meeting point of all these different ideas. And of course, it's about time. I really like the idea of time in coal, that it is compressed time made by quite cosmic forces, you know, the earth spinning around, gravity, heat, time. That's what made coal. And our future is almost written in the past. So there's something really sort of poetic about how the earth still continues to shape our lives.
I was actually going to ask you, where the time was going to come into this work, because there's always time in what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about the labour of the work. So it takes a long time to make the work, but the idea of time, you know, this is sort of deep time. It's like time within it's geological time. And this idea that coal formed over 300 million years ago actually shapes the lives that we live today. And almost we're mining the past at the expense of our future. So that unlocking of geological time allows us to go quicker. You know, we're able to sort of exploit coal and make, you know, design machines which they could go faster than humans could make. So that idea of speeding up, and really we all started to speed up in the Industrial Revolution. It was about efficiency, about time, going fast, making more, exploiting other people's time as well. And also I quite like the idea of sort of bringing to light the sort of the labour of the men as well. I mean, there's a figure like in 1870 or 1890, 43,000 men worked in the mines at that time, and lots of people were dying in them. They were dangerous places to work, so not just the mills, but also the mines as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I wanted to finish today with Hannah Lamb, whose work really intrigued me. I saw the photos and I'm sure that they don't do justice to it. So Hannah, thank you so much for having us. I mean, we met you a little earlier. Really intrigued by your work, and if you can share more about it, please.
Hi everybody, so my name's Hannah Lamb and I'm a textile artist. I'm based in Bingley in West Yorkshire, so the other side of the Pennine Hills that surround us. And this is the work that I'm showing as part of Connected Cloth. And the piece is called Incomplete Histories. And the piece is comprised of 6 components, and each of those pieces is designed to represent a book. The starting point for this exhibition around the subject of connected cloth and issues around textiles was something that I was quite passionate about, actually, and I wanted to look at the kind of interconnectedness of textile stories, about how textile moves around the world, about the influences of different nations. And one of the things that I'm quite passionate about is textile collections and textile archives. So my starting point for this work was a visit to the Bradford College Textile Archive, where I'm also a lecturer at Bradford School of Art, so it's very close to me. So I looked at beautiful old ledgers and recipe notebooks that relate to the textile industry. So these are kind of late 18th century, 19th century kind of books. And these are really records that were created by dyers and textile printers. And they were recording their working processes. So what we can see in the pieces of work is actually some of those notes. So I don't know, maybe we can go close to this piece here. We've got a really nice example here. So here you can see it says block calico colours, and there follows recipe for dye stuffs. And what I was interested in is picking out some of the words that actually relate to the global nature of textiles. So here you can see, for example, the word logwood, the word calico, indigo, and those repeat all the way through these books. And what I was drawn to was the fact that these things are mentioned in passing, but they don't really, they kind of suggest the links, the global links of the textile industry, but they don't necessarily tell you the whole picture. There's an incomplete history. We talk about the kind of the heyday of the textile industry in Britain, and we don't necessarily talk about how reliant it was upon the rest of the world and all of those influences of material, dye stuffs. And then also things like motifs. So I've picked out certain motifs that have perhaps a relevance to different cultures. So the influence of patterns from India, and indeed kind of printing processes from places like India, Japan. We wouldn't have screen printing without Japanese textile print methods, for example. So it's a really complicated story, and the more you kind of dig down into it, the more complex it becomes. So actually a little bit like Emily, I feel like this is just a starting point in me starting to explore you know, where all of those influences come from. And just wanted to give a sense of this very fragmented sort of history. So the processes that I've chosen to use in these pieces are all processes that sort of break down or play with the kind of incompleteness of imagery. So there are things like, perhaps I can just show you this piece here, Isabel. So there are processes that actually remove part of the fabric and only leave tiny little fragments remaining. And actually here it's the back, but they're names of dye stuffs. You can see, so this is a devore process, and it actually eats away or degrades part of the fabric. There's machine stitch in there as well. And then the blue is really characteristic of one of the processes that I use a lot, which is called cyanotype. Cyanotype is a process, it's a photographic process that we can use to create these really sort of ghostly images. And I love the, am I in a good spot for the light? Sorry, Isabel. It's a tricky one. The light's been really kind of, it's come and gone today, hasn't it? We okay here? Yeah. So cyanotype actually is a wonderful process for working with light. And light is actually, ironically, is one of the things that I love to bring into my work. So the idea of working with layers and transparency, but also with the cyanotype process, I'm able to use light as a media in the work that I create. So it's a photogram process where I actually lay objects onto the surface of the print and expose it to UV light, so to sunlight. So it actually, you know, it links back to sort of what Richard was saying about capturing time in a piece of work. It's actually, in a way, it's a kind of time-based media because it captures a moment in time. So there's all kinds of different processes layered up in these pieces, but really to give a suggestion of the kind of fragmentary nature of the histories that we tell about textiles and how incomplete those stories are.
Are you going to develop the work based on different stories?
I'd love to take it further, and I think the archives that we have at Bradford College are immense. They are really wide-ranging. So they include things like textiles that were sold to the African markets. They include things that were brought from India. They're really diverse, so it'd be really nice to drill down into some of those kind of individual topics and kind of get a little bit more depth and kind of dig a bit deeper. So this feels like very much touching the surface and sort of really just acknowledging my own ignorance, really, at this point. And then, yeah, I'd love to go a little bit further with that.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Anna. I just want to give you one last tour around this room because it's again a beautiful room. We're seeing here the work of Paddy Killer, and there's some photos of Cole which relate to Richard's work. We're coming to the end of our time. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Now is a good time. We're just going to carry on visiting this museum, and I will take more footage and put it on social media. But I think that you had a fantastic overview today of how creative and meaningful the work is. As mentioned earlier, all the work can be purchased, and I invite you to contact all the artists. I will put their contact details, obviously, on the video, as we always do. They love doing commission, but they also love sharing the work they have already made with you. So I encourage you, as always, to support them and go read about their story, their artist statement. It will engage you and it will make you think about the way we live our own lives, in this case with textile, in a different way. Thank you so much for joining us.